You're listening to Interchain FM, the Cosmos radio station. If you're seeking alpha in the cosmos, look no further. I'm your host, Django Unchained. We are back with Milky Way. Congratulations on almost launching. Let's introduce yourselves to our audience, since I don't think either of you have been on the podcast.
Thanks for having us, Django. I've been a huge fan of your podcast. So I have actually started off, in Web2 space, so I won't go into those boring details, but I kickstarted my Web3 journey in 2020. So my first gig was at Crypto.com, Centrex Exchange. Their headquarters is in Hong Kong, which is where I'm based. So I joined their product team, look after, their trading platform, which is really fun because before that, I was into Bitcoin and Ether trading, and then there wasn't much DeFi stuff back then. And so it was in terms of why, I transitioned out, it was because back then the token, CRO, it was an ERC20 token back then that serves not much purpose apart from trading. And then basically DeFi summer happened. And then they were like, oh, we need to build, a chain now. And then so DeFi applications can build on top of it so we can tap into that opportunity. So it's okay, great. How do we build our own chain? And then we were looking into all the different options. And then we landed actually on the Cosmos SDK tournament stack. And then that's when I was like, that's way cooler than doing market orders and limit orders at a Centrex exchange. And then Tendermint was hiring then. And then so I was like, okay, let's give it a try. And then applied, and then they hired me. And then so I joined Tendermint on the product side. So yeah.
Oh, I didn't realize that. When did you join Tendermint?
So that was 2021.
2021, yeah, that was after I left.
Yeah,
on the Emirates. Okay, interesting. Wow, I didn't know that. Good to know.
Yeah, so that's actually where I met June and JB. So we all were ex-Tendermint folks.
Oh, okay. I didn't know, June, that you joined Tendermint either. When was that?
It was actually quite late. I don't really remember to be exact when it was. I think it was around 2022 mid, was it? It was a couple of months before the brink, before, I wouldn't call it the collapse, but it was the end of Emirates, so to say, the unofficial.
The Cosmos Big Bang.
Yes, the Big Bang.
Big Bang Theory, yes.
Actually, Emirates collapsed maybe a year or several months after the Cosmos Big Bang, after everyone split up.
Okay,
yeah.
Big Bang 2.0.
Big Bang 2.0. Oh, that was, you mean that was when Pong, the interim CEO, left and Jay came back? That was the second Big Bang?
Yeah. Exactly.
Good times. Interesting. So, okay, and now that led the two of you to building Milky Way. And the last time I had JB and Fabo back, we were talking about Milky Way's liquid staking token, but now it looks like you guys are naturally moving on to liquid restaking. Tell us about your roadmap and what the plans are.
After we launched liquid staking for TIA, we were thinking about how do we expand our product suite, right? Because there are 3 other providers, liquid staking providers that support Cosmos L1s already, and then we don't want to be the 4th one that does exactly the same thing. And so we started, doing our research in DD and talked to a lot of different projects, especially up and coming projects building within the modular ecosystem, and then to kind of discover, their pain points. Is it going to be, on the liquid staking side for chain security, or is it on something else? And we discovered that a lot of them actually have a common pain point, which is the security aspect, because it's actually quite hard for new projects to bootstrap the required security needed to launch their project, be it, an L1 or Rollup, or just other middlewares, right? And that's when we noticed okay, restaking, it's taking off on Ethereum side with EigenLayer, on Bitcoin side with Babylon. And then so there's actually a use case on the modular side as well. And that's when we kind of decided to, build out the restaking platform for the modular side to support these projects in the ecosystem as well. And so that's kind of the, let's say, vertical expansion for us, where we do liquid staking plus restaking. And then in terms of liquid staking, we also, support selected L1s as well. For example, our next liquid staking token is Initia. I think they did an episode with you guys as well, so I also won't go into details. Interested people can just watch that. But yeah, so all the rollups on top of Initia, they actually post data to Celestia using Celestia underneath. And that's why we decided to, have Initia as our second liquid staking token that we support to really, help bootstrap the security for the entire ecosystem.
Exciting. Why is it that Milky Way has focused so much on the modular ecosystem, but particularly modular in the Cosmos context rather than the EVM context?
To begin with, I think a major bias, so to say, I would argue is that, we're all Cosmos folks. So I guess in some sense, we're kind of Cosmos pilled and kind of thinking, along the lines of Cosmos to begin with. I would say also, regarding modularity, I think one of the cornerstones that really kick off the concept itself fundamentally, in my opinion, would be Celestia's launch, as in data availability as a service. Being available is one of the core elements that has to be out there for modularity in the tech stack to be actively pursued in any sense whatsoever. Another core element I believe to be the case is restaking. It opens the floodgates to where the tech stack in itself from the protocol level can be in some sense flexible. For instance, a Cosmos chain for right now could technically also switch into a Rollup, and that is possible if you're, for instance, going on to if you're posting data to, for instance, Celestia, and you're switching on and you're connecting to Initia. This is totally possible in the Initia ecosystem as a nice example. So I think, especially in terms of modularity, I believe restaking was initially, thought of and inaugurated in the land of Ethereum, but due to data availability being kind of first actively pursued on production by Celestia, being on Cosmos actually has its benefits, and especially we've closely monitored what's going on the side of Initia's progress, and we noticed that they just tick so many boxes in terms of becoming whoever is connected to them, whichever ecosystem, whichever chain or product gets connected, has so many active features straight out of the box. I really like to call it as they started off with like 3 or 4 milestones already checked when they begun. So in that context, with these multiple points in hand, I think it's really was a no-brainer for us to really start off as an Initia, pursuing what kind of marks on the ecosystem we can make in terms of modularity. It made sense to pursue in the Cosmos ecosystem.
Yeah, Initia is a powerhouse. They're just shipping. I would also challenge the notion that restaking came out of the EVM ecosystem. The term restaking was created and marketed by them, but the concept was created by Polkadot and Cosmos, right, with shared security. Anyway, we won't go into that.
Yeah,
won't go into that. I think I've beat that horse to death already. In terms of Milky Way's architecture, has anything changed? Is it different now that you're supporting different ecosystems? Because I consider Celestia a different ecosystem than Initia, just because they're different chain ecosystems, if you know what I mean. They're not necessarily natively interoperable just yet, unless if IBC were turned on, I actually bucket that into the Cosmos ecosystem. Anyway, has anything changed with your architecture?
In what terms, in what aspect of the architecture you're referring to?
Your liquid restaking platform. Because before Milky TIA was supporting basically one token, and Milky Way created a liquid staking token. But now that you're branching out, has anything changed with your architecture, your product?
Initially, when we launched Milky, it is still the case currently, but Celestia did not support ICA natively. I mean, I haven't checked it for the last couple of days, but the last time I checked, it was going to be planned. It was going to be in an upgrade in the future.
I'll just pause right there in case anyone's confused about ICA. ICA is interchain accounts. We have done a complete episode and deep dive about it. So if you are confused, please go ahead and watch that primer. I will link it below. Go ahead.
Due to the lack of ICA, it's kind of one of the reasons why we noticed that it was difficult for existing liquid staking token providers to actually start start supporting Celestia, and that's where we thought of kind of a novel way which has kind of more security benefits by using native Cosmos modules that are existing in Cosmos SDK chains, namely authz, which we utilized to make sure that we were technically multisig based, but the security guarantees were, I would argue, to be actually much more higher. And using this method, we were able to ship without having ICA available. And because these other liquid staking providers were accustomed to shipping with ICA available, I'd say we were a much more smaller, lean team, and so we could ship in a marvelously fast pace. So initially, we launched on Osmosis as a smart contract. We realized it doesn't really require that much in terms of what we need to have on chain, and now that we're planning on supporting the init token as Milk Init on Initia, we are planning on supporting that with ICA since it's available, of course. And in terms of our restaking layer, we are going to be a Initia on top of Initia. We will be joining the ecosystem as a participant as well.
Does that mean you're deploying a rollup on Initia?
Initially, yes. That wasn't a deliberate play on words, but the reason behind this is, just iteration speeds that comes with the benefits of being a rollup. But obviously, there are legitimate decentralization concerns, and in the future roadmap, we're planning on making the restaking base layer itself be run by multiple different operators, and add in decentralized sequencing to make sure that it has a certain level of security that should be expected from a restaking layer.
Is that intended to be the canonical restaking rollup?
Yes, at this current point in time, that is where we are planning on sticking inside the Initia ecosystem.
Is the plan in the future to do this multi-rollup deployment across all these different modular ecosystems, or are you planning to use one rollup as a hub of sorts?
It's an interesting concept that we haven't really internally explored, but in enhancing the security, I think there are multiple different dimensions that we can approach this, and like deploying the rollup into multiple different ecosystems. I have heard this in passing, but at the moment, the exact ways we're going to make sure it stays decentralized is still kind of under conversation. At the moment, we've only kind of discussed decentralizing the operator set.
Doing a multi-rollup deployment is costly in terms of overhead and maintenance, and if you're not incurring the requisite liquidity from the underlying staking token, it may not be worth it. That's something to consider. We're really betting big on TIA and init tokens succeeding, right, and providing the liquidity that's needed for a derivative token to basically take off.
Just to clarify, we're actually not building liquid restaking. We're just doing restaking. Users deposit, they don't get a receipt token in return. So similar to how EigenLayer, if you deposit on EigenLayer, you don't get a receipt token. But there are other projects building on Eigen, like EtherFi Renzo. So for those, if you deposit into their platforms, you get a receipt token in return. So we're not doing it, but there's actually another company called Inertia. So they're
Inertia?
Yes, I know. It's all of these puns that was
yeah.
But yeah, so there's Initia and then there's Inertia. So Inertia is the one they're not the same team, by the way. So Inertia is the team that's building the liquid restaking token on top of us.
Milky Way is creating the restaking layer for Initia.
Just to add a bit of clarification, I wouldn't say for Initia, but it would be on top of Initia, to be exact, as in it doesn't necessarily, the AVSs that would be deployed on top of the Milky Way restaking layer does not necessarily have to be related to Initia at all.
Understood. So you're using Initia for DA.
Just to clarify, a DA so Initia itself still uses Celestia as DA underneath. So DA is technically still Celestia, but when we post data onto Initia, then that would be posted by Initia to Celestia. So, I mean, it's technically kind of both terms work.
This modular ecosystem is now getting a little bit too confusing. So, like, what's exactly happening on your rollup? It's execution, right? What does the Initia middle layer do?
What Initia itself, I mean, kind of adds to the restaking layer itself is by us being a Initia on Initia, it, for instance, handles a lot of assets in interoperability issues. I'm not sure that's the right term, but like, for instance, assets path unwinding issues that occur in assets that are sent to multiple channels. I'm pretty sure there's another term.
Routing.
Yes. For instance, routing issues. By being a Initia on Initia, they have an extra module that supports multiple different things out of the box, and so there's a lot of UX benefits, and also they have absolutely just spectacular UX. They have wallets that make integrations much more beneficial. So, in a sense, it's not directly benefiting the restaking layer itself per se, but in a passive sense, it's assisting in terms of being able to accelerate faster, and also in terms of AVSs, we were able to reach out to a lot of Initias that have also decentralization concerns, and we are providing the restaking benefit to them as well.
I see. So the draw of building on Initia is it provides really great dev UX and bootstrapping tools. And I suppose seamless cross rollup, cross ecosystem compatibility with its various AVS chains. And how many AVSs are, well, let me just back up for a second. So AVSs in the eigenlayer sense are intended to be smart contracts that are leveraging the shared security of ETH via eigenlayer. AVSs in the Milky Way context, are these rollups that exist on Initia, or are these future contracts that Milky Way intends to incubate for its restaking product suite?
Just to kind of clarify, AVSs on top of eigenlayer aren't necessarily smart contracts. I'm not sure whether there is a case
modules. I mean, how are they implementing that?
I mean, I haven't looked into recent developments, so don't quote me on this. But from what I understand, AVSs just need to have just need to be able to trigger the slashing logic when a offense has occurred on their on the AVS itself. So in a sense, it does not necessarily need to be on top of Ethereum, which is the reason why.
Oh, it could be rollups.
Exactly, it can be practically anything in some sense. That's why it's a service instead of a chain or something else, which is kind of the reasons why it's like very effective to be used in a cross-chain context, because it's in some sense it can be chain agnostic, where you're just borrowing the security, and exposed by having slashing risk, the operators are incentivized to not behave in a bad way. So in the exact same way, all the AVSs that would be on top of the Milky Way restaking layer wouldn't necessarily need to be a rollup, or need to even adhere to any kind of language restrictions that that would be imposed upon them if it was like a smart contract on top of it.
Yeah, just to clarify a little bit in terms of the AVSs that we are actually partnering with. So we're working with like 3 groups right now. So one is the rollup. So because like we mentioned earlier, rollups tend to start with centralized sequencer, which is okay if you're a rollup that's not planning to have a huge TVL on top of you. But then for rollups that want to do, like, for example, DEX, margin trading, perp trading, like those that want to accrue high TVL, then there's a concern in terms of, that one entity, will they arbitrage, will they extract MEV, or will they just do, whatever they want to, like, kind of steal funds from that DApp, right? So that's why to them decentralizing the sequencer set is very important. That's where our restaking service comes into place to offer that security. So we're actually partnered with a few rollups for that. So that's kind of the first bucket. And then the second bucket is actually we're working with an Oracle provider as well. For Oracle's, like, they don't need to be a chain, right? For this provider, they basically have, validators submit pricing or operators submit pricing, it needs to be punishable, or else to stop a validator from submitting Bitcoin as $1, etc. And then so that's where our restaking comes into place, because it has that opportunity cost needs to be there for them to not perform these sort of offenses. So that's a second use case. And then the third one is actually on the bridging side as well, because you need to have reliable uptime for the bridging, and to make sure the validators or the operators are actually passing through the messages. And that's also what we're working with a bridging provider to use our restaking services for the security, actually.
You're telling me that Milky Way's killer application is to provide economic disincentive for new dApps that need to bootstrap without their own validator sets yet, and impose slashability in case there are any on-chain infringements detected.
Yep. It's more the crypto economic security needed. So for example, a new project, it's quite hard for them to amass hundreds of millions to delegate to their validator set, for example. So that's where the whole rented security concept comes into place.
What are the partner projects that are starting off using Initia or Milk in it?
Yep,
Sorry,
so
I need to disambiguate. What's the difference between these two? I keep
Initia is L1. Initia are the rollups built on top of the Initia L1. Yeah.
Oh.
And I think the entire ecosystem is called Omnitia. I might be wrong on that.
Omnitia. There's Omnichain Initia.
Yeah.
Omniscia, it's omniscient, omnipresent, omnichain. Okay, and Milk in it is the
liquid staking token. Yes. We haven't, I don't think
Rollup.
Inertia team has named the liquid restaking token yet. We're literally just discussing today. We're remilked?
Remilked. Sour milk. Milk gone bad in it.
Soy milk.
Soy milk. Oat milk. Who's using the Milk in it token for slashing conditions?
At the moment, Milk in it will be launched, and then it will be used on top of the Initia's Enshrine liquidity, and then the use cases will not, I shouldn't say probably, but will exist in the future for other DeFi opportunities. And at the moment, for restaking, the architecture itself is going to be multi-asset, but at the moment we're going to be solely focusing on TIA itself. The Milk in it token itself is not going to be related to restaking at launch.
In terms of liquid restaking, do you know what the plan with Inertia is? Are they going to build a product where if they create Milk in it tokens, custody them on Inertia, if they could be earning Milky Way points and Inertia points, I suppose? There's just layers upon layers of staking. Let's just create a staking token, liquid stake that, and restake that, and then liquid restake that. Now I've got 4 layers of abstraction from the actual underlying token. It's going all good.
Can't speak on behalf of their point system because they haven't released it yet. So I'll leave them for them to announce. But then, yes, so it will be integrated into our point system for sure.
What's your point system? Last time I talked to your team, there wasn't a fully fleshed out point system other than giving people the ability to stake TIA.
In terms of capability, users can stake their TIA right now with us, or for some time now, and then we give them the Milk TIA in return. So just by holding the Milk TIA accrues points already, but if you want additional points, because we do want to encourage people to use their Milk TIA across the various DeFi applications. So if you use your Milk TIA across DeFi applications that we have integrated with, which you can check on our website, which is app.milkyway.zone/discovery. And so on there, you can see, which ones are integrated and are accruing additional points if you use your Milk TIA there. And we also have periodic campaigns, bonus campaigns, which we announce on Twitter. So for those which we co-market with those apps. So it will be like a 3-week campaign where Milk TIA being used on that app will accrue additional bonus points. So this is what we have currently. And since we are launching, the liquid staking for Initia, Milk in it, and also restaking, and so all of these, so when we launch a public testnet for Initia, and so that will, count as 4 points as well. And also when we do restaking, when users deposit into vaults, that would count as points as well.
There's a new piece of the puzzle that I'm picking up. There's going to be a vault.
The vault is for depositing the TIA and Miltia for the restaking platform, because we need to accrue the TVL for that to provide the security to secure the projects.
People can participate in your public testnet, right? Accrue points. And what are they earning?
Points for now. No. So it will
Points
be
for-
our own token, which is not live yet because we haven't TGE'd. So it will translate to the airdrop.
And what is your own token?
It
Milk?
should be called Milk, yes.
Milky? Milk? And when you TGE, where is Milk going to be launched?
We should be minting that on our own Initia. Right, June? Okay, good.
Yes.
Initia.
I know. And the weird thing about Minish, it's like MINITIA, so it's like mini Tia as well.
I know. Good luck if you're dyslexic, by the way.
We should grab Zon and like stand and come up and be like, can you please explain the naming behind it?
Wanna
Yeah.
push-
How did
yeah.
you guys come up with this?
Like, guys! you thought the name collisions in Cosmos was bad. It's got nothing on Initia. Will Milky Way support additional liquid staking tokens in the future?
We definitely are pretty selective in terms of the tokens that we choose to select, because we don't want to just, support all Cosmos L1s. But yeah, so we definitely will be supporting more. We haven't decided on the third one. So yeah, if there are any projects, that are interested, feel free to reach out to us and then we can chat further.
What tokens can people restake with on the Milky Way zone?
In terms of restaking, at the moment, we're most likely going to be starting off with TIA, ST TIA, and Milk TIA.
But we do plan to go multi-asset in the future.
Yes. But it really depends on whether, there could be another liquid staking provider for TIA close by. We're kind of seeing activity of other liquid staking providers. So, the sky's the limit in terms of, as long as it's TIA tokens, TIA derivatives, they should be targeted to be supported.
There's two main ones, right? The Milky Ways and Strides. Are there others?
Not officially announced, but then there's been more projects that have announced that they're launching. So
Which ones?
one was Drop, Quicksilver. I'm not sure when they are planning to, but they can also potentially suddenly support.
Quicksilver. Wow, I haven't heard that name in a while. Are there other news that you guys haven't covered yet, or housekeeping items that people should be aware of?
Maybe June can walk through in terms of how we structure the architecture for the restaking platform, how it's a little bit different. Because basically when we did the research in terms of like their pain point for whether a restaking platform is needed. And then so when we decide to build it, we then, looked into the architecture in terms of, how we're going to build it. The good thing for us is that, Eigen and Babylon and the other guys have, been around for some time. So we actually spoke with a lot of Eigen operators, AVSs, restakers, etc., to find out, what their experience and journey has been like. And then are there any, points that can be improved? And so we kind of, discovered the pain points and then based our architecture based on, the feedback of that and also the projects that we're working with that will use our restaking services.
Based on, a lot of feedback from the AVSs, as Josie mentioned, and also kind of observing what's going on in an eigenlayer, sort of, under the hood in terms of how the operators are reacting and the kind of feedback they're giving out. We noticed, a couple of pain points. One of them, I would argue, is that a lot of AVSs, they actually want to be supported by their own token eventually. And in some sense, that feature is, at the moment, from what I gather, is not supported. But Milky Way is going to support not just multi-assets, but also a method for the restaking layer itself to be programmable. And what I mean by this is we've coined the term programmable rules. I'm pretty sure it's a term that's used elsewhere as well, but this being available in a restaking layer is, I would argue, to be the bread and butter of what makes Milky Way's restaking layer have an edge, or in a sense more modular aligned. So what I mean by this is, for this example, it would be a AVS that wishes to be secured by multiple tokens, or to switch which tokens they wish to be secured by. This can be programmed by the AVS themselves, and they can switch these parameters, so to say, by supplying them to the restaking layer. At this current point in time, for launch, we're aiming to have two different types of programmable rules. One of them would be delegation rules, and the other would be slashing rules. In terms of slashing rules, it's another pain point that we've noticed, where restakers, obviously they want to have as little exposure to slashing as possible. And but at the same time, there can be other ways to kind of disincentivize operators to not misbehave. And one of those, and as a result, we've thought of different ways that slashing can be implemented. And also, if you think about it, it's kind of harsh if you're going to be slashing if you have only one types of slashing for every type of offense. So in Milky Way, there's currently 3 types of slashing planning to be implemented. We call them burn slash, stake slash, and jail slash. So, for instance, an AVS can decide this type of offense is mild. So we're not going to be burn slashing it instantly. We're only going to be, for instance, jail slashing. So you just don't get rewards for a period of time. And this another type of offense is considered to be kind of severe. Then in that case, they can be, for instance, stake slashed, in which case their stake would be distributed to other operators. And then obviously there would be the burn slash.
To other operators.
Yes. So
doesn't that incentivize other malicious operators to attack?
That is a very good point. In the perspective of a operator-centric restaking, which we call it internally, we've also coined a term called AVS-centric restaking. And what this means is that the stake of the operators is actually not defined by the restakers. As in, the restakers, this is where the delegation rules kick in. These new slashing rules, by the way, the ones that are not burn slash cannot technically be used for operator-centric restaking, as you've clearly you were clearly surprised by the way that this offense is punished. I guess I did the order a bit wrong, but in the concept in the realm of the delegation rules, instead of restakers delegating to the operators, they just delegate to the AVS, and it's the AVS that chooses how these delegations are distributed. Of course, there are multiple concerns that can arise from this. If you have any questions, of course, we're more than happy to explain, but this actually kind of fundamentally changes the dynamics in restaking, which is another pain point we noticed when we were observing what was going on in the side of EigenLayer, where if you are running an operator on a restaking layer, for the restaking layer or the AVS's benefit, what an operator should be focusing on is choosing which AVS is best to run their software on, and also making sure their software is as secure and scalable as possible. This should be the 2 things that they should be focusing on, and what is basically their service, so to say. Instead of that being the action being incentivized, the things that our operators are actually incentivized to do is to go out and try and get whales to stake to them instead. So in a sense, what they are focusing on in order to be sufficiently incentivized is not the action that they are being incentivized to do. And this disparity, I think, skews incentives. And as a result, if you think about it, operators, their focus is not on the thing that they are providing, so to say. A way that this can be changed is that the delegations themselves are happening all on the AVS, and there are separate rules that define how the AVS actually delegates its funds out. And this can be based on, for instance, much more industry relevant parameters that the AVSs themselves hold as more important in their core set of values, which who are the restaking layer to really define. In some sense, I would also argue, decentralization is also something. I mean, the high decentralization is always preferable, but at the same time, too much decentralization, as a lot of teams have experienced in the past, results in slow iteration speeds, and it's difficult to progress. So a lot of teams end up, in reality, kind of deferring the decentralization a bit down the line until it makes more sense to do so. You'll see this happening in a lot of teams where they transition to a DAO later on, when it's initially just a single like a multi-sig governing funds. So what we notice these kind of trends happening in the crypto scene, and we realize this can be baked inside the restaking layer itself and offered as a service, so that AVSs don't really have to think about these implementing these or having the operational security on transitioning to these kind of processes, so that those kind of things that they need to do in a very secure and OPSEC aware method can all happen on chain, on the restaking layer itself, in a more transparent way, so to say.
Help me understand the thesis that you guys had that informs the design methodology of your current programmable, what did you call it? Programmable rules?
Yes.
I mean, you're fundamentally, this is not the most diplomatic word, but you're reinventing the wheel for staking. If you just think about the staking context, this is like ripping that all out and fundamentally changing all of that. So what's the thesis that drives this? It must be that you believe restaking is a different beast than just vanilla staking.
I would argue the reason why the dynamics in proof of stake chains have evolved in this method, in this direction, where stakers are staking to operators and operators have different stakes amongst themselves based on the amount of economic stake they have under their custody, is because you're doing it for a single service, and this stake represents the security of the chain itself. In the context of AVSs, the stake of each operator does not necessarily need to translate into how much stake they have in terms of machine power. Machine power, is that the right term? That is provided for the protocol, so to say. So, for instance, I mean, if there is a protocol that wishes to translate the amount of delegations as to how much weight that their input is, in the context of proof of stake, the dynamics between the stakers, the validators, and the protocol itself is necessary, because the stake that the validator has directly translate to the interval that they are producing blocks. If you have a higher stake, you're going to be proposing blocks more frequently. But in the context of AVSs, that's not necessarily needs to be the case. For instance, there can be an AVS where the operators do not have different types of machine power inputs.
Voting power?
I mean, yes, like there is no concept of voting power in certain contexts of AVSs.
What do you mean?
For instance, it could just be the way that the AVSs operate, the way the protocol operates. It is possible that the stake itself is not a variable that affects the outcome, so to say.
You mean what, in terms of compute, you mean?
Yes, in terms of compute, exactly. So in the context of proof of stake chains, you're in solely proof of stake, or where the compute is calculated in a way where each operator has a higher amount of stake. The higher amount of stake equates to a weighted compute.
Right, stake weighted voting power. Yeah.
Exactly. So in that context, it makes sense. But there are AVSs where it just needs to be sufficiently decentralized, and the stake itself is less of a variable, so to say. And also,
I don't understand that. I don't understand that notion. Why, in the context of AVSs, where let's say it's a new one and they don't have their own token yet, they haven't TGE'd, but they want to deploy a rollup in prod, and they need some amount of stake weighted voting power to start off with in order to be sufficiently secure and such that the economic value an operator could extract at the beginning is much lower than the cost of extraction via the slashing conditions present using the restaking token. Why is it that decentralization is more of a factor there in the bootstrapping phase?
In terms of slashing, I would argue that slashing itself still happens to these operators. As in, if they misbehave, the slashing is still going to happen, even if it's AVS based. So in terms of the operators being disincentivized to misbehave is still there, even if it's AVS-based restaking. With that in mind, there are services where this stake being decentralized based on whether the restakers choose which operator is less of an importance to them. As in, this can be just distributed based on, for instance, different variables. I'll give you an example, for instance. Let's say there is an oracle, and the oracle wants to distribute the stake in a way, instead of based on the stake that's on each operator, on whether these operators supply the most accurate price for a long period of time, then the operator that has
Oh,
performed, yes. So the way the stake is distributed can change, if that makes sense.
I see. So you're coming at it from the lens of let's have the applications themselves be able to rent the stake weighted voting power, manually decide how much to distribute amongst their choice validators. So it's kind of like basically a foundation delegation program, but on chain.
Exactly.
And renting someone else's stake instead of tokens from their own coffers.
Yes, I think it can be totally coined that way, but at the same time, it can also be applied in the protocol level. So it will be slightly different to a foundation delegation. For instance, it could be totally even in the beginning, and then according to how the operators are performing, it can be adjusted.
Right.
This is, I would argue, to be one of many different use cases where these programmable rules can be really adjusted to a way where we're kind of getting out of the frame of that this has to be in like you said, a vote weighted compute, and it's really up to the AVS. We're creating like a free marketplace where the AVS has, in some sense, someone can come and create an AVS where it's just completely centralized. And I think it shouldn't be the restaking layer's concern to choose how centralized or decentralized it is. It's up to the AVS themselves to, depending on the state of they are on their product, so that they can evolve to be more decentralized if they choose that it's necessary.
This begs the question, is there a cost for various AVS chains to rent this share of voting power, right? And is there some supply and demand involved? Your stake weighted voting power is capped by how much TVL you have, meaning it's finite. So if there's probably going to be competition. Is there like an auction or something similar to Polkadot's parachain auctions, or is there some other marketplace? Imagine there's heavy AVS competition for the stake weighted voting power.
So the stake weighted voting power is, I wouldn't say there's competition, because that's the kind of the premise of shared security or pool security, as in the same amount of assets can be distributed to multiple different AVSs.
Right. Restaked. You need to rehypothecate. Now it gets interesting. I haven't heard a convincing counterargument to this, which is, and this goes against Eigenlayer's whole thesis, which is, what happens if we could take the same ETH and use it to secure, say, 5 different AVS modules, and their argument is that it 5x's the economic security by it adds this like multiplier to the security of each chain by virtue of the number of AVS chains that it's securing. But I don't see that. Like, there's no way that the logic could flow that way, because if you have a finite resource of, let's say, like 1 ETH, that 1 ETH is being restaked, as in rehypothecated, to 5 different chains. There's still only the economic security of that 1 ETH, not 5 times 1 ETH. Only 1 ETH is getting slashed. And well, what's happening is like the synthetic ETH on all these different AVS chains is getting slashed, but there's only one underlying ETH. You're creating this derivatives complex on top of like, M1 ETH, right? You've got now like M2 ETH, M2 money supply of ETH. How does it in any way add security?
I'd actually beg to differ. So if you look at it in this in the restaker's perspective, let's add a kind of a more degenerate example. Let's say instead of restaking, they're participating in derivatives trading. You could argue that adding your asset to 1 AVS is 1.2x, to 2 1.4x, and 5 is 2x. So
wait, why?
Because your asset is used to generate yield, but at the same time you're exposed to more risk of each AVS getting slashed.
Are you saying that an AVS chain is also getting stake weighted voting power from the other AVS chains that are being secured?
No, so the same asset would be supplying security to multiple different AVSs.
Yes.
Yes.
So why is that more secure rather than less secure?
No, I mean, I wouldn't say it's more secure because you're securing more AVSs. I'd say the same asset is being utilized by multiple different AVSs. That wouldn't necessarily mean that there's more secure. In the user's perspective, actually, they would be taking in more risk because they have more sources of where they can be slashed by. They have extra downsides. At the same time, they have extra upsides.
I'm more speaking about consensus risk of equivocation. So here's a tangible example. The same operator is running the 5 AVS chains as well as the restaking layer. So now what happens is, imagine if they've incurred enough stake weighted voting power on the base layer, there's enough extractable value on the 5 AVS chains, right? So let's say the EV of equivocating for the 5 AVS modules is 10 ETH, but that 10 ETH is being secured on the base layer by 1 ETH, meaning it's higher EV to act maliciously and lie and get away with it and be only slashed 1 ETH, is what I mean.
So if I understood correctly, because the operator is running the AVS for multiple different...
The same operator could be branded differently, right? Because I could have Sybil operators, but effectively it's the same entity.
So an operator could technically, because they're securing multiple, they can basically get slashed on multiple at the same time. And as a result, there's higher risk.
Let's imagine there's 5 different mango markets on the 5 various chains. If I lie and send malicious transactions to each of the 5 chains, which results in me stealing like $300 million, but because there's only 1 ETH that is securing the chains and people find out and slash me, I'm slashed 1 ETH, I get away with $300 million minus the cost of 1 ETH at spot.
In that context, I would argue, I mean...
But you know what I mean? This is the economic security of Eigenlayer. And no one's been able to share how this is more secure rather than less secure for all AVS chains.
In the context of, if you're looking at it through the lens of a single AVS, though, so first of all, I mean, I think a direct way to kind of deter this is to have a lot of operators. But as you said, you know, if there's operators with using different aliases, it can't really be deterred. If you're going down that road, it's the same with Cosmos chains. Like, who knows whether the top 10 validators are actually just a single person running every single one of them. So I think that argument is kind of, I mean, it's more of like something you just have to trust socially by just proof of what you're seeing on Twitter and their activity, and that you meet in real life, and, you know, proof of the internet. So in a kind of very primitive sense. So given that, you know, these operators are distinct entities, it's really up to the AVS to do their due diligence in terms of which operators they choose to run their AVS. And I think this is also one of the parameters that they should be considering, especially if you're going to be running something that is deeply rooted in finance. The operator sets, they should clearly make sure that they're choosing multiple different ones. So yes, I completely agree with this point. But I think the basis there is that there will be operators that are running with multiple different aliases, and I think that's a sort of an attack vector, which is theoretically possible. But at the same time, there was this tweet recently from someone that I saw where, you know, to be working in crypto, I think it was from David from Babylon, where he said you have to be trustful in order to be in crypto eventually, in some sense. I think I saw it a couple of days ago. Don't quote me on this. Maybe my memory is a bit blurry. But I
think that's a worldview of people who've come here probably after 2020 or something. I don't know, because that's certainly not the worldview of crypto pre.
Yes, it's
that don't trust, verify. I don't know when that has died, but this is.
I completely agree with you, but in some sense, you know, this verification process, which you're saying, is that, you know, it's you're getting verified, you know, by, for instance, going to conferences and seeing these people in separate different contexts, and that's kind of, what you have to is the basis trust. I think you have to assume in order for all this to actually make sense.
Right. Yeah. I think that it's beneficial for at least the Cosmos ecosystem because we've we have we're in this sort of like little younger sibling, older sibling relationship with Ethereum where the older sibling is the one that's the front runner of getting all these attacks. The younger sibling kind of learns the hard lessons learned by the older sibling. Most of the very detrimental attacks, like the very high profile ones, have happened in the EVM ecosystem and they've subsequently taken the hit. In the Cosmos ecosystem, a lot of these things sort of worked because we're a much smaller pawn, and so we're not such a big target for attack. But really, there's kind of this consensus around when this upcoming bull market and when the bubble is going to burst, and that's around sometime next year, right? We're going to have a major rally to sky high valuations we haven't seen before, and then boom, it's going to bust. The busts are usually preceded by some catastrophic black swan event. I'm kind of anticipating some huge attack to like happen on Eigenlayer. There's going to be some really major thing that happens with the liquid restaking layer. If it's going to happen, it's going to happen on Ethereum and Cosmos. We get to watch that happen, sadly, and learn from it. We get the benefit of hindsight and be able to like fix any economic security holds before it gets exploited on us.
I fundamentally agree with you that like Ethereum is kind of like a big brother to almost any chain that has programmable compute on top of the layer one. But I'd actually beg to differ that everything Ethereum has done is kind of front running. And I think one thing that's, I mean, obviously, all Cosmos books are very proud of is IBC. So in that sense, at the very least, we are being less front run because, we have the most secure bridging protocol that has not yet been.
Yeah.
At the same time, to go back on what you mentioned, I actually totally agree. Just looking at how restaking functions in kind of like an architectural standpoint, that if at some point when there's so much assets locked onto the restaking layer to the point where it's beneficial for an operator to actually do this, this can totally happen. I mean, that's exactly what eigenlayer and restaking layers are trying to prevent from happening. In that context, I would also argue, though, that there's also a significant chance that that attack vector, as viable as it may be, is actually so small compared to any other attack vector that's usually prevalent in any kind of application. So to say, it's like, for instance, no Cosmos POS chain has been tried to be attacked via economic security. It's always like a bug inside the application level. I would say that the chance of that happening is actually very, very, very low. If you're going to be like an engineer working in any context in IT, you have to kind of make some kind of assumptions. For instance, the CPU chip that, let's say, AWS is using has like a backdoor and is compromised. And this is something that, no one is really going to be getting ready for, so to say. As much as, we tend to idealize, decentralization, these kind of black swan events, when they occur, they just occur, so to say. We just kind of hope it's not something that's targeted and, it's just kind of like an unfortunate series of events that are going to happen. For most other things, I think restaking provides sufficient security to a point where, unless there's something as cataclysmic as a black swan event occurs, it would be considered sufficient security.
And that's a fair point too. We haven't seen any consensus level equivocations happen in the history of crypto outside of inflation bugs that were caught by the dev teams themselves. You're right. It's usually these exploits happen on the application layer. It's usually economic activity, flash loans, and liquidating a vault or pool or what have you. Yeah, this is great. Where can people follow up with Milky Way progress, and where do they go to get involved, and how can people find you guys?
We actually just revamped our docs. So if you go to docs.milkyway.zone, you can check out our latest progress on both the liquid staking side and also the restaking. Obviously, as we're building out the feature, we will be adding more and more information to the docs itself, and also, like the tech docs will also, the integration stuff will also be published. So we will be announcing all of these on Twitter, and we'll also be at Brussels for the Modular Summit, Nebular Summit, Interval Day, etc. So there will also be more announcements coming up. So stay tuned and follow us on Twitter, Telegram, Discord.
Thank you guys for coming on the show. We'll see you in the next one.
Thanks,
Fantastic.
guys.
So much.